Okay, this is part 4 of our 1964 Dodge Dart ZF8HP70 swap. I wanted to go through real quick what we have to put together in order to put it in the car and mate the two. We obviously have our slant 6. The adapter is made by a company called Transdap that I don't believe they're still in business. It's close, it's not exact, but it will work and it does fit. The plate is billet 3/4 inch aluminum, and then the crank space adapter is billet as well. They make the adapter and machine it out to the 2.15 outside journal diameter, and then they make I believe it's a 1.8 interior bushing. I got that through a separate kit, but that goes into the crank. And then this sleeve would fit over the crankshaft with the orientation of the crank bolts, which then in turn, this pocket holds the receiving end of the, or the male end of the torque converter for the ZF8. One of the problems we had is obviously the dust shield for a ZF8 is different than the dust shield for a small block 727. Little modification, not much, but as you can see, it has some internal bolts that are pocket set that will fit inside the block itself. There'll be some bolts coming back through the back side of the block into the adapter plate, and then there will be pass-through bolts on the bell housing that will then take it and mate it securely to the block once it rests on the locator pins. This has been somewhat of a nightmare because the adapter plate originally is made for a 727 small block, which is the same bell housing as the ZF8HP, but the ZF8HP takes M8 torque converter bolts, and the 727 small block will either take a 3/8 or a 7/16. So our difficulty was getting the M8 bolt to the proper length. Once the flex plate with the ring gear fits upon the crank, you have to space the torque converter to the right amount. And fortunately, there's a part number. I'm sure you can see it if anybody's doing this swap. There's a shouldered bolt from Granger, which we were able to come up with, which will take up the slop in the holes. Each of the torque converter holes were 400 thousandths. The shank on an M8 bolt is only 300 thousandths. So then the problem we have is shearing. So once the force, rotational force comes, I was really worried that it was going to shear off the bolts. But we found what they call a shoulder screw, and that's a 10 millimeter, which is 300 thousandths, and it just takes up almost exactly all of the slop and fits really nicely, or almost 400 thousandths. It fits 397 thousandths to 400 thousandths, and it fits in the hole. And that'll give us our proper setback distance. We did have to put some spacers on the back side. There's some marine epoxy, and it's pop riveted on the back side of the flex plate in order to make up for the shoulder bolt difference, the height that was going to be the length, which is also 10 millimeters. So we're going to use these bolts from Granger to set the torque converter. Obviously, the spacer on the crankshaft required a separate bolt because that won't go through all the way to the crank. So we came up with a star washer with washers on grade 8 fine thread 7/16 1.25" bolts, which will allow us to pass through the spacer and into the crank. We also had to order the Dodge truck large U-joint, 1350 U-joint, which is standard like on the 489 case that we have in the car currently. It's basically the good Mopar U-joint. It fits on the back of the tail shaft, output shaft, such as that. And now we'll be able to get a measurement from this yoke out to the rear end 489 case with the other 1350 U-joint and have a slip joint made in there so the car can move. That's essentially that part of it. We've got to torque everything down. We have a transmission ready to go. We've dummied it up. Now it's time to put everything together and Loctite it and put everything in, and then hopefully this evening my son will be here and we'll be able to set it in the car and start putting the rest of the exhaust manifolds, the turbo, the fuel injection on all the other parts and pieces that are going to be required to get this thing to fire up. And then we can begin the trans tunnel work. So we'll know exactly where we're at. Thank you much.